realize she's our soul and our guide. And she is, when we enter the center, we meet our true selves. Karl Karenyi, who's a Hungarian classical scholar, says about the labyrinth, he said, we go around and around and around to our deepest selves, where we meet the divine mind, the other, the divine mind, the God, not as other, but as self. And there is Baba Yaga and the divine, and we realize we are all divine. We are all a part of this. And at the center, we realize who we are. You know, Jesus in the Nag Hammadi text, which is censored by the church, he said, I didn't come to save you. I came to remind you of who you are. And don't just follow the Christ, become the Christ that you are.
Aloha and welcome to the show, guys. Today we have the incredible privilege of hosting Dr. Betty Kovacs, a scholar who delves deep into the mysteries of consciousness, death, and the symbolic language of the cosmos. Together, we'll explore her fascinating insights on how ancient wisdom and modern science converge to illuminate our understanding of life and what lies beyond. Before we dive in, I want to thank my podcast, Ohana, for your continuous support. Remember, the only way for new listeners to find us is by leaving us a positive rating. So if you've enjoyed our conversations thus far, please drop us a 5-star review. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Betty Kovacs. Well, thank you, Betty, for coming on to the show. I really appreciate your time and your work that you've done. And for our listeners who may not be familiar with you or your work, could you please introduce yourself and maybe share what drew you to explore the connections between consciousness, symbolism, and life beyond existence?
Yes, well, I guess it's a long story. I'll try to make it short, but
no,
I think
take your time.
Okay. I think all my life, my brother and I lived in the country growing up, and we just had so many questions about the world, you know, just what's going on? Why are we here? What's this all about, you know? And so my life became a search to find answers to that. I think we just had so many intense questions. And so as I grew up, I thought, well, I didn't know in those days, there weren't the discussions we have today. One didn't hear anything about visions of the other world. And there was religion, but in my case, it was basically Christian. My parents didn't belong to anything, but my brother and I always found a church wherever we moved to, you know, mainly where there were lots of kids, you know. But that was important in my life because the symbols and the story of Jesus as a man who was loving and kind and a beautiful human being, that was impressive and important for me, but I couldn't believe. All my life, I needed to experience it myself. But I finally then in the university decided, first of all, I studied religion, and then I went to mythology and fairy tales, which are very much from the soul. And then I went to shamanism. And I went to South America a couple of times and worked with shamans, but I just still needed my own experience. And that happened when our son died. Then the visions really did begin to come. And after my husband died 2 years later, then visions with him. So, but I studied in university the myths and fairy tales and the symbols, and I realized that we pretty much operate with the left brain. That's a rational thinking in the West, unfortunately. But the right brain, connected to the heart, has another language, our first language, and that's symbolic language. And it's also the language of the intermediate world, the spirit world, that language is archetypal, symbolic, and we have the ability, through the right brain and the heart, to be totally connected to that. So I I had a wonderful time with students. It was during the 60s and 70s when I first started teaching mythology, and the students were great. We were just discovering everything together, you know, the symbols and what that really meant. We realized, and after reading Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, he understood very well that these myths are not random or fairy tales. They're not created by the left brain. They are organized by the soul, by an organizing principle within us. And that's why there are similar tales all over the world. So we had a lot of excitement with that. And so I found that symbolic language, of course, is our language with the other side, and feeling and the symbols.
Yeah, that's amazing. I read both your books. I didn't finish your first book, but I really loved your book, The Miracle of Death. You describe your deep personal experiences that led to its writing. Could you elaborate on these experiences, if you're comfortable with that, and explain and why you called the book Miracle? Because Miracle of Death term, yes, exactly. It's not usually associated with death, miracle, but yes.
That's right. Well, you know, I began to realize after I had feared death all my life, because my mother had been an orphan, basically. I mean, her mother had died young. And in the South at that time, I mean, if your mother was dead, basically you were kind of like an orphan. And sometimes they were sent out to work in various places. She wasn't, but her mother was an orphan. She was sent out. Her father was a twin. He and his twin had been orphans. They were sent out to live with someone. It's like a Dickens life. But my mother's mother died when she was young, and I was so fearful that my mother would die. So I couldn't even bear to hear the word death. And here later I write a book, The Miracle of Death. But you always fear that your child, you know, as parents, we're totally alert 100% of the time for their safety. And when he was killed in a car accident, of course, I had been pursuing a visionary life to the degree that I could before, and I taught it, you know, for years, the world mythology and also myth and fairy tale and symbolic language. But it was when he died that something opened up, and he was fully present to our consciousness, and my husband as well, and he had not been interested. He respected my work, but he wasn't. He just said, I've never had an experience like that, and I don't know how to relate to it. But after his son's death, he did. He just opened up. And the two of us experienced many, many times for the next 2 years, Pishti's consciousness. And my husband could actually have had the visions of him. I only felt his energy. I knew exactly where it was in the room, and his presence, what he said, of course, inward. So that made the difference. I realized how creative it is really to die when you think about it, because here we are on the planet, and we play a particular game, and we learn things, and we're able to let go of the body, let that go, and go back into spirit and heal whatever needs to be healed, and experience the joy and the reality of that world. And creatively we can choose another situation to come into, and to play a different game, and to love in different ways, you know, perhaps with the same people, but in different relationships. But by being able to die and be reborn physically, you know, is an interesting thing. Of course, we die all the time to our old selves as we grow and become. But when I realized, actually, I had written the book and I didn't know what to name it. I didn't know what the title should be. And Kim was here, and I was saying, I just don't know what title to have. And then I was reading in fact, it was the dream I had before we went to the hospital the day we found out he was not going to make it. He was in the emergency care unit for 13 days, and he was on all of the equipment, and they said that we will know that day whether he will make it or not. And just before I woke up, I had a dream that there were spirits were just rushing to me, and they were saying, a miracle, a miracle, a miracle. And so when I knew that was the day we'd find out, and I thought, it's interesting. And I told his girlfriend, she was with us all the time too. She was only 19. They were so much in love. And so she was with us at the hospital all the time. And I told them the dream on the way, but I said, we have to be careful because the other world sees death in a very different way than we do. I don't know whether it means a miracle that he's going to live or the miracle that he's going to transition. And when we got there, we realized that he wasn't going to make it. And I remember Jenny just kind of collapsed, and my husband caught her. I mean, we'd had such hopes, especially she had. I was beginning to think he wouldn't make it. But at any rate, it was, the other world was telling me this too is a miracle. You know, he's going to leave this body. And of course we realized later that we had planned much of this on the other side, that because what does our world need to know more than anything? And that is that death is not the end. It's really not the end. We are born and die many, many times. And it's not the end. We are eternal, as our ancestors told us. We are eternal, immortal, and divine. But the most important thing we have to realize first is that we're immortal. We don't die. And I think that many people are experiencing that today. In fact, this morning, Kim and I have a group through Forever Family Foundation called the Visionaries, and it's a group of people who come together, and they can feel very free to talk about the experiences they've had with those who have died. And we have heard so many experiences of parents or wives or husbands in which the person dies, and yet they are powerfully in touch with their presence. And they, for instance, one said this morning, you know, I didn't think about those things too much. And now it's my whole, you know, because we want to connect with those we love, we want to connect with the other side. And this is the tragedy of the Western world, is that we have separated from the other dimension, which we are supposed to be connected and co-create together, you know, and that these people are bringing the dimensions together. People are dying, and they are immediately returning in vision, and the world is changing, and it is being healed to a great degree with that. And that's a miracle too, that they can create and co-create from the other side.
Yeah. And he was your only son?
Yes.
Your only
Yes, the only child, yes.
Your only child. Oh, wow. And then your mother passed away right before then?
She did. 1 year before, my mother was crossing a road and was hit by a car and killed instantly. And when our son Pishtika was in the hospital, on the day that she had actually died, they said, we're going to have to take him off the machines. He won't make it. Well, they said, we won't make it. And I said, take him off the machines then. And so then there was some reason with the CAT scan that the doctor on the weekend didn't do it. And so, but when they knew that he wouldn't make it, it was on the day that my mother died and exactly the hour that she died. And they did take him off of all of the machines but one, the respirator. And so we couldn't get him off the machines, it seemed. And yet, when he was 12 years old, he had a dream about the number 10. So that was Sunday, November 10th. They called just before it was early in the morning. We went every day, of course, and stayed sometimes at night. They said, we can take him off the machine. It's okay. Because it was another CAT scan, and he's totally brain dead, so we can do it. That was the 10th. And his dream was this, when he was 12 years old, not quite 12, that he dreamed that he was in the hospital, an intensive care ward, and that they had operated on him. And he said, I was up above the hospital, Mom, looking down at my dead body, he called it. And truly, he was brain dead, we didn't know. And then he said there was a period of darkness, and then after that, he said, I was on the other side, and there was like a horseshoe shaped, with me at the top of the horseshoe, 4 boys to the left, 4 to the right. In the center was an eternal fire. And I looked at the 10th one, was in an aura of light, and we were all waiting for him to arrive. And he would be number 10, and I knew that I would be complete, because 10 is a number of completeness. And so when he was in the we couldn't get him off the machine until the 10th. And on the morning of the 10th, that all happened. So there were just so many things like that. But we did feel with the visions with him that he would often try to tell us things and say, remember. And it's like, wasn't telling us because we didn't know, it's that we didn't remember. So it was, changed our lives, certainly changed my husband's life tremendously.
Yeah, and I think in the book you mentioned that even all his 4 close friends had some kind of vision or consciousness from your son as well. He connected.
Yeah, they were kind of, several of them were, they just couldn't quite, they would look out at the world and say, I don't want to be like that man when I grow up. I don't want to be like that. And so they were kind of rebels, and they would often go up into the mountains and sit around a campfire and talk, and instead of going to a football game, I guess. But it's true, they talked about those things and had some experiences when he was alive. And then afterwards, they all did feel that, they said it changed their lives completely, and they knew that there's really no death. But I hear that often from mothers whose sons or daughters have been killed and passed on, that it changes the lives of so many people. And I think that's what will heal our world. One of the major things is that we are making these connections. And of course, there are all of the near-death experiences that we now know about, millions and millions and millions of near-death experiences. And in my book, The Merchants of Light, I talk about the fact that this is the 5th renaissance of this underground shaman, mystic, scientist tradition. And we have quantum physics, which is a science to support the continuation of life in the multidimensional world. And people are experiencing things which I never heard of when I was growing up.
Yeah, exactly. And you talked a lot about the symbolism in ancient myths. How does that help, I guess, help us to understand the modern experiences of grief and loss?
Well, since all of these dreams and visions are from the intermediate world, and they're organized by that world, that is, there is an organizing principle. We can say the soul or symbolic language. No language is random. It has its grammar. So knowing that and seeing those same symbols around the world were very, very helpful. Helps to understand our experiences. To have these symbols, to see how multi-leveled they are and how universal they are. That we say, wait, something's going on here, and it helps us then to understand our own. I was so glad that I had found Carl Jung's work about symbolic language and dreams when I was in college. And it helped me so much because the dreams were guiding me, but I needed to understand them better. And I think the more we work with our dreams, we know we hold the key to it. Others can help us, but our soul holds the key to the meaning. But it just, again and again, they guided me, as I have many of them in Merchants of Light, and also some in Miracle that related to the death. I mean, my soul knew before our son died that he was going to die. And a matter of fact, I had a dream when I was pregnant that it was true. I didn't understand it until later, but in this dream when I was pregnant, I dreamed that I was in my mother's old one-room schoolhouse, but there was an upstairs. Of course, I never saw her schoolhouse, but that was a heritage, you might say. I went upstairs, and there were many Chinese lanterns hanging, and one elongated lantern was lit, and it was pulsating. And I knew in the dream, that's the child, that's the soul that is in me, who will be born through me. And then I saw there was an old man sitting there, and he was smoking a pipe. And as he smoked the pipe, the smoke came up and formed a painting which faced me. And I could see a boy, a young man, coming in, and he was carrying a bag, like a sack on his back, not very filled. And he was approaching a gate, which on his side was death. On my side, it was life. And so that's the miracle of death too, is that it's another birth. Death is another birth. And so then he went through the gate and then immediately turned left and started going up to the mountain. And at the top of the mountain, there was all kinds of bright golden light, and he vanished. And later I realized, oh my God, even then I know I'd interpreted it in different ways. And then at 12, he had his dream. And then in the year he died, he had another dream, very specific. In fact, it was almost like he was practicing going out of the body through the universe. And then I had 2 years in which I dreamed that our son died. But sometimes it was like, oh no, that was my friend's son. But I wept as though it was mine. And so I think I was prepared in those ways that even though I didn't interpret it as actual death, my whole being was being prepared. And even my husband had a vision in his office, which is here in the house, but he had a vision that suddenly he saw Pishti, our son's car, off the side of the freeway, and he saw his body superimposed on it. And then he said he heard himself say, oh, that's right, Pishti. It's almost time for you to do this. And that made him feel horrible. He didn't know where that came from. But Pishti answered and said, that's right, Dad. I'll be out of the house for a little while. And then he went completely unconscious until the day we got the call that he was in the hospital. So it seems that he was out of the house, during the whole process of dying. And then after the memorial, the next day, we had experiences with him and did for the next 2 years. And then my husband was killed in his home country, Hungary. He had gone there and was killed while he was there. So there were miracles all the way associated with the death too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And in your book, you talked about the divine game. You mentioned that in your writing. How does that relate to our understanding of life and death?
That was interesting because my husband had a very powerful vision in which he saw that and understood that. And he told me that. And always when we had these experiences, we would record them. But we were through recording, and then he said, oh, but. And I wrote it down, and I put it somewhere. And on the year anniversary, it was raining outside. I was here alone. And I found that in my desk drawer. And I thought, oh, I forgot that. But it was really beautiful. And it was so profound because he said, birth and death, hold them in each hand, honor them, play with them. This is the divine game. This is the game we play of being born into matter and then leaving and coming back again and creating really on both sides. And I don't think I have the words exactly correct to that. But it was birth and death are. Can you remember, Kim? Birth. You want to hand me my book and get it?
The second part of it.
Yeah, but anyway, it was just when I found that I was so excited because I thought that's of course.
Time and space. Is that the one? Birth and death or
Yeah.
time and space.
Yeah. No, that's not. But at any rate, you'll find it. But it was just beautiful because it's true. Hold them in both hands. They're not different. As Gandhi said, birth and death are not two different states, but two different aspects of the same state, which is true. And birth is a miracle. So is death because it's a birth on the other side. And if we could, the most important thing for healing is to learn that, to know that. And so many people are learning it now.
Yeah.
I think this is it. Let's see.
Okay.
Of course. Death is as divine as life. Hold them in both hands. Death is as divine as life. Hold them in both hands. Play with them. Balance them. Balance them. This is the divine game. Isn't that beautiful?
It is. It seems like you were prepared through this whole journey with visions and dreams. It was like you said, you were being prepared for something you didn't know at the time.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, imagine being pregnant and having that experience. And then at 12, he had it.
Yeah.
And then in the year of his death, there was a huge crash. Well, in fact, first of all, he was in the hospital, and I was there, and I said to him in this dream, and vision, I guess it was dream or vision, I don't remember which it was he had, that when he was in the hospital, that if you choose to die, we will let you go. But if you choose to return whole and well. And you know, I saw that, he told me the dream at the time, but I'd forgotten. And then we found it, going through his poetry and things after his death. And that's exactly what I did say when I was at the hospital. You know, I said, and so in this dream, I said that to him, and then he left the room and then came back. He walked through the walls. And then when he came back, I said, you are afraid to die? And he said no, and he got in the bed, pulled the sheets over his head, and then shot out of the bed. The spirit or soul shot out of the bed, and he was flying through the cosmos, passing planets and suns so fast, he said they popped as I passed. And then boom, he was back in the bed. He was back in this dimension. But then at the end, he was in the hospital, and there was a man working with him, and he kept telling him, come back, come back. And then Pishti said he shot out of the body again and went through the cosmos. It's the same as before. And he said, I looked back at that body and I realized that was not me. And he was making him a cappuccino before he went off to college, and I was going to mine. And I remember taking hold of his arm and saying, oh, thank God it wasn't you, which of course was crazy because it was him. I mean, it was just that wasn't his. And so I said, we'll talk about it tonight, which we talked about. But I forgot, and we never talked about it again. But he wrote it down, and we found it after he died, and I thought, oh my goodness, it was so true of his death.
Yeah. You often use light as a symbol in your work. What does light represent in the context of evolving human consciousness?
Well, I think that light is consciousness, and it's love. And so to experience light is to experience loving consciousness. Consciousness through the heart. Our ancestors always said the heart knows and loves at the same time, simultaneously. So it's loving consciousness. True consciousness is loving consciousness. When it's separated from love, it's not true consciousness. It's separated from the light. And the energy of love is the most powerful frequency that there is. It can change everything. True consciousness is loving consciousness. When it's separated from love, it's not true consciousness. It's separated from the light. And the energy of love is the most powerful frequency that there is. It can change everything. And it is light.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How can ordinary individuals recognize and interpret symbols in their daily lives to gain maybe deeper insights of their personal and collective consciousness?
Yes. Well, we live in a culture that has split itself off from the heart, the soul, the right brain, and just settled in the left brain, which does not have the ability to see meaning or purpose or context or feeling. So how do we do it? I think that it's experience. When we have an experience or an event in our lives, it's just good to contemplate it, because often events are very symbolic. And And if we look, I mean, we can take it too far, but I mean, you know, if we look at the, how did that mean? Why did I have that? What does that really mean? And we always go to the heart. What do we feel? What is the intuition that comes from that? And then with dreams, to record our dreams and think about them and talk about them with someone who's open. But we must remember that they don't have the key. We have the key. They can help us. But so often in the past, there were people who felt they knew everything, and they would try to tell people what their dreams meant. And no, the dreamer has the connection to the heart of the dream and must listen to herself or himself rather than someone else. But if they're helpful, good. But, you know, I taught mythology and fairy tale because we studied symbols. You know, it's like in the fairy tale, first there's a clearing in the woods. Well, that's consciousness. You can see. If it's a clearing, you see clearly. And that's conscious. We're conscious. Then we enter into the forest. Well, that's clear. The dark forest, we can't see. That's the unknown. It's just basic structures that we, and then when we meet individuals, like Baba Yaga is in, I love the Russian fairy tale of Baba Yaga because she looks scary sometimes, but she meets us on the way, on our path in the forest. And she can scold us, she can do whatever. She helps us to become conscious. And then she can give us rest and food and send us on our way. And what does she do? She throws a ball of yarn in front of us. So we are guided all the way. It is our guiding. And then we might not realize the fullness of who Baba Yaga is until later in the journey. But later we realize she's our soul and our guide. And she is, when we enter the center, we meet our true selves. As Karl Karenyi, who's a Hungarian classical scholar, says about the labyrinth, he said, we go around and around and around to our deepest selves, where we meet the divine mind, the other, the divine mind, the God, not as other, but as self. And there is Baba Yaga and the divine, and we realize we are all divine. We are all a part of this. And at the center, we realize who we are. You know, Jesus in the Nag Hammadi text, which was censored by the church, he said, I didn't come to save you. I came to remind you of who you are. And don't just follow the Christ. Become the Christ that you are.
Yeah, that is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
You discuss global consciousness and the shift. Do you see we're shifting? I think you mentioned that we're coming to that global consciousness shift right now.
Yes.
Do you see that? What are some of the signs?
You know, when we look out at the world and we see the plans that people have for the rest of us, these are people who are deeply wounded by the false stories that have been told to us about who we are. People in power always want us to think we're nothing, you know, that sinners against God and so on. But they're very strong. As a matter of fact, I think in our time that they are perhaps stronger, that we have actually brought that darkness to the surface. And here we see, oh my goodness, what they're planning for us, a world government in which we have no choice. We become transhumanized. We won't be the human species anymore. And we are insignificant. We don't need women. We can make our own wombs. And we don't, you know, separate, killing out anything that is truly human, because they don't know who we are. They certainly do not know who we are. So the darkness is perhaps at its peak. And many people don't know it, but we know something's wrong that's going on. And yet at the same time, I think the evidence is that also surfacing is the light and the consciousness and the desire and absolute demand to know who we are and what this is all about, you know. And so we have millions and millions and millions of near-death experiencers. They have always existed in every culture, in every age. But today, because of technology, we can bring people back to life. And And people are talking about it. Before they were called hallucinations, and now we know what they are, because no, it's not just a lack of oxygen, because they often know things while they're flatliners, dead. They know things that are happening in the world. And I love the story of the man who told everything. Very often they tell everything that happened in the operating room. And one said, and by the way, on the 7th floor, that when you hear that story, there's a red tennis shoe on the sill, and they found it. So, I mean, they're fully conscious, but they're not in their body. And so near-death experiences have helped many people. And then there's quantum physics, finally a science worthy of soul, at least beginning to be, because when science began in the Royal Society in 1660 in England, the church condemned any investigation into soul or spirit, because the heretic was the mystic. That would reduce the power of the church. But I didn't know for a long time, until I did my research, that the church forbade investigation into consciousness. And so what did we have? What they explored, which is matter. So they said there's nothing but matter. No, that's just what you've been able to explore. So quantum physics goes beyond matter into the origins and into other dimensions. So that's another piece of evidence. The other is that so many people are having experiences with the other side, phenomenal experiences. And of course, there's all types of unusual happenings in the cosmos with human beings on Earth that we didn't know about before. It happened before, but we didn't know about it. But now it seems to be really intensifying. And then the last thing I would think about is visions. That Ishvan, my husband, had visions of the merchants of light, and that they only come when they know we are ready to shift, to help us. And there are children being born who say they are from other worlds, but they have come to help us in the shift. And some of them are so bright, it's impossible. You know, I mean, and very intuitive and sensitive. And I had a vision that even before the deaths, that just I was still in my too rational state, but when I had this vision, I thought, there's no way you could make that up. This is huge. And it was that I, with two friends, were doing a ritual for children of the earth, and there was this disc of light that came in through the glass doors and hovered over my head. And the consciousness and the light was so intense. And the consciousness was so, I knew this is cosmic consciousness, but I didn't have the capability of relating to it. So out of the center, bottom center of the disc, a woman, a female, just spiraled out. And I could see her from the head to the bust. And she had on a white square satin hat and white down to her waist. And well, that was a mandala. The circle and the square form wholeness. At any rate, she sang through me, and she said, "You have called us, and we are here. Can you feel us? Your planet has called us, and we are here." It was the most powerful experience of love and such a high consciousness. She was like a generator that she could, reduce down so that I could pick up this intense consciousness. And then I started knowing all kinds of things, like I could see a light around the planet, and she was helping me to understand that light comes from all over the universe. We've been there for a long time. And now we are ready to connect to your planet. And there was actually a ritual of connecting that light to the planet, deeply into the roots of the planet. And it's as though, and she said, "You have joined to yourselves this day all those on your planet who are creating worlds of peace and light." Love and light, I think it was. And it was so powerful that I realized that, oh my goodness, now is the time. It's what she was saying. Now and we did a ritual through which we could just feel that energy go through us and into the planet. And later I read that in India, in Sri Aurobindo's ashram, that the mystics there in the 50s had the experience of the light from above coming through us and connecting us to the planet. And I thought, and my husband had that too with the Merchants of Light, that they were coming in. And so I think there's evidence like that from many different people. And I think that all of these pieces of evidence are real indicators of a shift that's taking place. But we're up against the darkness of all these 2,500 years at least that we know of censorship of who we are. And it's created a real pathology. And we need to know that most of our leaders are pathological in what they want to do. And we must see it for what it is, know that they need to be healed as well as ourselves for the planet to be healed. But I think, and I had a vision too, another piece of evidence, of souls just coming from all over the universe and spiraling around the planet and being born on the planet, all over the planet, in all different ethnic groups. And I had that was the first vision I had after our son died, that I saw, and it was like a Native American chanting. And then I heard them say, our brothers and sisters on the earth are dreaming a terrible dream. So it is true, this Western left brain, nothing but matter, nothing's important, no intrinsic values, is a terrible dream. The mystics always knew there were values, because the great mystics said there are three dimensions, great dimensions. One is pure consciousness, pure spirit, pure intellect, no form whatsoever. But it's always moving into the intermediate world, or archetypal symbolic world. And then that moves into matter, but they're all moving together. It's all one. And of course the values, the mystic knows the source of all value is definitely in pure intelligence, pure spirit, and of course the intermediate world. But now the postmodernists don't know that, because they're in the left brain, and they say there are no intrinsic values. You can have your value, I can have mine, but after that, it's all meaningless, you know. This is not true. This is because we got rid of the mystic, that we don't know any better, and it's destroying our world. But the good news is that I think powerful things are happening, and it's time. As they say, now is the time, and I believe that.
Yeah. Are you afraid of death, Betty?
No, not at all. Not. But, you know, I don't want to be in pain. I think, you know, I think if we're really good creators, that we have to collectively create a world in which we're healthy, and in which we do not have to die by letting the body kill us. You know, it just, to suffer. I grieve to see the suffering people have to go through to get out of the body. And we are creators. If we're creators, let's do a better job. But it means collectively, what we do to the environment, and what kind of medicines we force on our children and others, how we think of the body, that nature has ways of healing us. You know, we're always told that there's an herb, there's something in nature for every illness. But we need to have, we can't, if you go to the doctor today, you could end up with 10 medicines in a visit with a few of them. And they don't know what the complications are of all of them together in a particular individual. Any more than they know, well, they do know some of the harm they're doing with some of their medicines. But anyway, I just think the natural, working with the laws of nature to honor nature. Nature is conscious. And our ancestors wanted more than anything to know what are the laws of nature. And they related to her with respect, always with, you know, meditation and gratitude and planting and harvesting. It was and knowing that we are a very important part of it. So I think that would be, I would fear that for everybody, that kind of pain and suffering. I think we probably don't need that there are other ways to learn things. And but I think we need to realize we are creators, we can do a better job. There are stories from the past that people, when they died, they were able simply to step out of the body. And sometimes they would just leave signs, you know, maybe not even the body, but hair and nails was the story they told. But what they were really saying is, we can step out of the body gently.
I
That's a-
spoke
yeah.
to a woman.
Hmm?
Her name was Mary. I forget her last name at the moment, but she was a NDE, a near-death survivor, and she talked about same things that you're saying. She actually wasn't afraid of death. She actually wanted. She can't wait to go to the other side, is what she says.
Well,
So,
I
yeah.
think it's a return home, and the people who have experienced it know that that world is whole and beautiful, and it's our wholeness, which is the spirit, the love is there, and no, I think once we know what death is, we don't fear it. That doesn't mean that when someone dies, we are not going to miss them and grieve terribly, because we liked relating in that form, with them. And I think now, I'm 87, and I don't know how much longer I have, but I want to complete some work I've got started, and I want to finish it. And I know that when the time is right, I will go, and I'm okay with that. Of course, I just wish that we didn't have to suffer, that, or have others spend so much of their lives taking care. Now, sometimes that's important for people to grow and develop, but the taking care of. But as I said before, I think we can do a more creative job of how to age and die.
What are some practical steps individuals can take to engage with and enhance their spiritual consciousness?
I think that when we want to know and we're asking questions, that what happens is that we open the gate to our own inner archetypal labyrinth. And when we enter that labyrinth, it's not a maze to confuse us and take us wrong places. If we stay on the path, it will take us to the center. And what happens is that we are now working with nature. Nature and our consciousness are working together to create events on that path that we need to teach us what we need to know. One writer has put it this way: we are an aggregate of energy of the field, and the field includes us and we include it. So whatever we think, we influence the field, and then the field influences us. So when we enter the labyrinth, we are working consciously with the field to create events for our growth and development. And what we will do is we will attract people, we will attract books, we will attract techniques, all kinds of things that we need. And we will attract pain and sorrow as we choose. And but I think that once we have the question, then the gate opens. It's an individual path, but on it are all kinds of helpers. And the spirit, Baba Yaga guide, is with us every step of the way.
Can you describe, and can you discuss maybe your 5 major waves of awakening that you identified in your research and their impact on our understanding of consciousness?
Well, everybody's journey is different in awakening to that, and mine was always the question. What's going on? The question. And I just looked everywhere I could, but I couldn't find anybody knew anything. And so I went to college, but there I was hit with science and religion. But there were beautiful things in Christianity, but I couldn't believe. I wanted to know. And of course, the original teachings of Jesus, he was a shaman, and he did teach how to awaken to our own Christ. And that's what I wanted. So for me, it was a path, because I couldn't find another one, of the university and studying. So I studied religions, and then myths and fairy tales, and then shamanism. So for me, it was a path of the intellect, of the left brain, but rooted in feeling and love and desiring to see the whole picture. And so I learned how to do that through those studies. And then I would say that the experiences of my life with the 3 deaths in my family, and that opened the visionary state in which I no longer doubted anymore, finally. I knew that death is not the end. It's simply another birth. And that we are all capable of whatever we choose whatever we desire that's in our heart that we came to do, we are capable of it. And we have to let go the horrible story, the wretched myth that the dictators, the would-be dictators and those in power have tried to make us believe that we are nothing. And the story in Genesis of the tree, the tree of good and evil, it was really only one tree, and that was a tree of light and consciousness and love. And always we were told to eat it, to take the fruit. I have in the book a picture of both the god and the goddess pointing to the fruit of the tree. Take it, it's yours to eat. Of course, because it was awakening. It was awakening to who we are. But the Deuteronomists, who wanted power over us, told us that we could not eat it, that it was a sin to eat it, and that if we ate it, we'd die. Well, the truth is, if we're conscious, we know we don't die. So it was all of the opposites. And then we were thrown out of the garden. We were cursed. The ground was cursed. Having children was cursed. And we weren't worthy of living in nature. This has been a powerful myth. Even when people didn't believe it, they still were influenced deeply by it. No, we're nothing, you know. And that is we've got to awaken to that fraudulent, power-driven story and know who we are and let that other one go and step into our own wholeness. And then anything is possible.
True. Your book, Merchants of Light, explores transformative power of awakening consciousness across human history. Is there modern day merchants of lights that are influencing us today?
Oh, I think precisely. They're here now. Yes. And we become, we may be them, but certainly we become merchants of light when we awaken to the light. And it's interesting because when my husband said it's that they give all of these things for the price. What is that? We have to pay a price. What is the price we pay for them? Consciousness. Consciousness is the price we pay, and it's a gift to us. Oh yes, I think that this is the time of Merchants of Light. And when my husband had that vision, came up with Merchants of Light, my son said in the vision, Dad, look up in the I Ching. And he gave him from the top to the bottom. Usually you start from the bottom up. Straight, broken, broken, straight, straight, broken. And so when he no longer was in the vision, he said to me, we do still have the I Ching, don't we? And I said, yeah, somewhere. And I ran in my study to get it, went back, and he said, okay, look this up. So I looked in the back and I saw these lines. And I was so stunned, I just had to show him, because the vision had been about the jackal. I had had the vision of jackal. He was having that the jackal takes in the decayed into his body and transforms it into living food. And so Pishti had said to my husband Ishvan, Dad, meaning my husband, and I should read this carefully because that is your work and it is the work of the earth. Well, when I saw the hexagram, it was 18 working on what has decayed. It was exactly in harmony with the vision he'd had, that our work is working what has decayed, that has made us lose who we are, the knowledge of who we are, this censorship, this horrible view of who we are. And so in reading it, it was just so amazing. And I said, how did you remember straight, broken, broken? And he said, oh, that's easy. It's straight, broken, broken, straight. That's an M, and then straight, and then the fallen line is L. He said, Merchants of Light. And I thought, since English is second language, sometimes he'd come up with some strange phrases. So I thought, well, maybe that's one of them. But afterwards, I realized that people around the world have had contact with Merchants of Light. That very word, Merchants of Light. And in one of the Renaissance periods, in 1600, they were called Merchants of Light. And these things like that make even if you started falling into doubt, even though you do know. But yes, that they are. It's very clear that they're coming now. My husband said they only come when they know that's a time to change. So that was encouraging. So when I look out and I see what's going on, sometimes I can't believe it. And then I think, but now is the time. We have the light as well. And while we need to look at the dark, we can't get depressed about it and think, oh, nothing can be done. No, everything can be done if we stand in the light and stand in the power of who we are.
True. Yeah. Before we conclude, do you have any words of encouragement maybe for those who are grieving loss of their loved ones, or maybe final thoughts or messages that you'd like to leave for our listeners today?
Well, I think that it's so important to know what, if we haven't had an experience ourselves, I know sometimes my friend would say, yeah, Betty, I know you've had those experiences, I can't. And I said, well, yes, you can. It's that we have to know we can, get rid of the negative part. And if we haven't, I would say go to people who have, like Anthony Chen, a French filmmaker, has done beautiful, lot of near-death experiences recorded, and they're so powerful. You just listen to them. Listen to other people who've had near-death experiences or who have had experiences with people on the other side, and know that if you're not having them, just be open to that possibility, because you're as capable as anybody else, I would tell them, to have them. But we're living in a time when we've been so brainwashed that there's nothing, It's nothing going on, so that's just a hallucination, or that's just a coincidence. We have to deal with that in ourselves, and then to let it go and say, wait a minute, all of these people have had these experiences. I can too. And remember that science supports the reality of other dimensions. So if we're not having them, then know these things and then be open to your own, because it will happen. I remember when I was in Peru and nothing was happening, and one of the shamans said, we were going to work with sacred medicine, and I said, okay, give me double. And then he said, double? And because I said nothing. And I remember that he found a stone that was like a third eye, and he gave it to me, and he said, know that you will awaken. It's just knowing that and believing that. And it took a while, because I was so much in the left brain, had taken the left brain path because I didn't know any other path to find out. Well, ultimately it did lead me home so I could have the experiences, but it was a long way here,
How long did it take you? Did it take you years?
Well, I was always studying it and trying to figure out, and step by step, but and then I went to Peru, and I did have some experiences there that I didn't know what they meant, but they certainly told me there was something going on, and some evidence. And then, but it was really when Pishti died that just opened. And I remember my husband, he had the first experience with Pishti. It probably lasted an hour. And when he sat on the bed and he said, I had no idea what you were talking about. I will never look at the earth in the same way again. It's like he was totally changed.
Yeah, he definitely was. I think he felt the pain right in his heart.
Yeah.
He felt some kind of pressure. Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't know what it was.
No. But then when he had the vision and he realized something I had experienced before, was that he and his son, Pishti, were of the same soul. And he had experiences in which in the lives they had lived, sometimes they would be one, and when they were one, Pishti didn't explain anything. When they were two, then Pishti would explain things to him. So he actually experienced that sometimes they come as one, sometimes they come as two. And he had said to me, sometimes I go first in death, or sometimes Pishti does, depending upon the work, because we're all in parallel worlds. But I had an experience in a ritual of that very thing, that they were of the same soul. My husband was Betty Kovacs, and that was the firstborn that often been named that in his family. And so we named our son that, but we thought maybe we don't want to do that or whatever. And the voice said to me, you thought that you chose to name Pishti Istvan, but really he could have had no other name because they are of the same soul. And so I came home and I said to my son, first of all, I said, I had this strange experience that you and your dad are the same soul. He was painting and he said, sounds about right. and didn't even go further. I thought, really? So then I said to my husband, he said the same thing. And so I didn't go any further with it. But here in the first vision that Ishwan had after Pishti died, he saw that and experienced it. I don't think he remembered that I'd ever said anything. So I thought, there's so many things, we experience that are so different and vaster than what we think here, but nevertheless true.
Do you think that is that what soulmates are? I mean, they're together, they're one, they always will be together?
Well, soulmates, people speak of that in a more romantic way, don't they? I think that we are so deeply connected to so many people. I say to Kim, for example, she had been my student at the college, and right after Pishti died, and she was a great student, and she would come to my office, we'd talk about things, and I retired, she went to UCLA, but sometimes it'd be a conference out here. Claremont has about 6 colleges, and so we got to know each other. But I think now that I know our relationship, that we had an agreement to come and do this work together too, because I couldn't do it without her. She's an editor, publisher, does all of the technical part that I don't even have to think about. But there's so many things. I talked to her about the things. She has such a good eye about, she'll say, I don't like that sentence, that could be better, But she's just very, well, I think that we did plan this on the other side too. So I think we have deep and profound relationships with people. Maybe we're all mated by soul, in some way, through love.
Yeah. Definitely. I can see that. I can definitely see that. Where can our listeners find you and your work? Where is the best place to find you?
The Kamlak Center, that's Kamlak, KAMLAK.com. And notice that the ML is Merchants of Light. We chose that name not knowing that, and I woke up one morning and said, look at the name. Ka is that breathing out, and Ak, bringing in the birth and the death, and at the center, we are merchants of light, all of us. That is our destiny. And so it's Kamlak, KAMLAK.com, and you can order books through Kamlak. And if you want to sign up for the newsletter, a chapter of Merchants of Light will be sent to you, and there are videos and podcasts and webinars and things like that on the website as well. Articles.
And does Kim, does she run that too?
She does. She runs everything.
I know she does.
She does. I couldn't. If anything happens to her, it's over. So I tell her to take care of herself, not just for that.
Yes, right. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your deep personal experiences. I know discussing the loss of your son and your husband and your mom is not an easy topic, but your strength and your insights offer hope to others who are facing similar grief. And your courage in sharing these stories is truly inspiring, and it provides guidance for those who are struggling to navigate their own journeys through tragedy. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, and I thank the universe. Otherwise, I couldn't have gotten through it, But it's available to all of us. We need to honor ourselves more than we have been taught to do. So I thank you. I'm so happy to meet you and talk with you.
Me too. And that brings us to an end of another episode of the Sensible Hippie podcast. I want to extend a heartfelt mahalo to Dr. Betty Kovacs for joining us today and sharing her profound insights. It's conversations like these that challenge us to think deeper and see beyond the ordinary. If you found today's episode enlightening, please help us grow by leaving us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to your podcast. Your support is crucial in helping us reach more listeners and continue delivering content that sparks thought and conversation. Remember, you are part of our podcast Ohana, and together we're exploring the vast horizons of knowledge and wisdom. Until the next time, keep your minds open and your spirits high. Ahui ho kako. Bye.
The flowers bloom in springtime, the leaves fly in the fall, but we have one another through the changes of them all. These unspoken wonders, these stories left to tell, there can't be any other who loves me quite as well.
If we should ever falter, should we ever hang by a string, remember we have each other through all the seasons, through everything. These unspoken wonders, these stories left to tell, there can't be any other who loves me quite as well. Through it all, summer, winter, spring, the wind